This is a video tutorial about how to make a hand weight to help reduce tremors due to Parkinson's. This hand weight is basically a glorified beanbag. It goes on your hand like this, and when you're shaking really bad, it can help reduce the amount of tremors that you have. My mother has Parkinson's and dementia, and this is very helpful to her. It's basically a weight that goes on your hand, and inside is a beanbag for all intents and purposes. It's filled with BBs. So I'm going to show you how to make that today. The cost of this is less than $5, and this is what you'll need. You'll need a piece of cloth, 8 inches by 16 inches. It can be any pattern that you like. It should be a non-stretchy fabric, something like cotton. Cotton works great. 8 by 16 inches. You need a 6 by 6 inch piece of fabric. It can be the same as this, or it can be different. Doesn't matter. That will be the weight. You'll need some BBs. These were about $3.50. You'll need 4.5 inches of Velcro. It needs to be the sew-on Velcro. You can get about 3 feet of that for about $1. You need 4 inches of elastic. I think this is 1 inch elastic, and about 3 feet of that is $1. You can get a 1/4 yard of fabric. Will make 2 sets of hand weights. A 1/4 yard of fabric is about $1. So you can do the math. It's not very expensive. The first thing you need to do is download the pattern from the link that's in the description, and download that, print it out, and you'll want to cut out the weight to start with. So we're going to begin with our 6 by 6 inch piece of fabric. You'll fold it in half. Put the pattern on there. And now you can use a ballpoint pen, you can use a pencil, you can use a fine tip Sharpie. It really doesn't matter. You want to trace around the pattern directly onto the fabric. And what's important to know about this pattern is that this line that you're drawing is not your cutting line like it is with many fabrics. This will be your stitching line. This is the line that you will stitch on top of. Trace around it just like that. I'm going to pin it just so the fabric doesn't shift. And I'm going to sew on 3 sides. 1, 2, 3, directly on the line, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to sew it again. So it'll have a double seam, which will make it a little bit more sturdy. So there it is. It's all stitched on 3 sides. And now we're going to trim the fabric. I usually cut somewhere between a 1/4 inch and 3/8 of an inch away from the stitches all the way around on all 3 sides that I stitched. And then you want to trim the 2 corners down here at the bottom, just so that when you turn it, that fabric won't bunch up. Now you're going to turn this right side out, and then we'll be ready to put the BBs in, the weight. And there it is. This is the brand of BB that I use. You can use whatever you have available at your own stores. The very first time I made a weight for my mother, I used a 1/3 cup of BBs. It just seemed like a good amount to me. And I borrowed a postal scale, and in this particular brand I found that a 1/3 cup of BBs is right at 12 ounces. So I measured out how much a pound would be, and a pound of BBs is a scant half cup. That's up to about right there. So I made a pound weight for my mother, and that was just too heavy. She could not control it. She's 76 years old, and she is quite frail. So today I'm going to make one somewhere between 12 ounces and 16 ounces. So I'm going to pour the 12 ounces of BBs in the cup, and then I'm going to add just a few more. But not as many as up to the 16 ounce line. So now we're going to put these BBs into our bag. If you have a funnel, you can use a funnel, or you can just take a piece of paper, fold it in half, make your own funnel. There we go. And there's our weight. We can pin it closed right now. We're not going to sew it shut yet because we're going to go ahead and make the cover, and then we're going to give it a test run. We're going to put this weight into the cover and try it out, see how that works. If it works, that's great. We'll sew it shut and it's all good. If it's too heavy, we'll take some weight out. If it's not heavy enough, we can add a little bit more. So just set this aside now and we'll move on to the cover. So I've cut out the pattern for the cover. You can download this pattern from the internet. The link is in the description. And I've taken this pattern and I've traced it onto a piece of cardboard. I use a cereal box. I do this because it's just easier to trace around. It's what I like to do. You don't have to do that. It's just not necessary. But now take your fabric, it's 8 by 16 inches, and just like any sewing project that you do, before you do anything, before you cut or mark anything at all, you should always wash your fabric, dry it, and iron it before you begin. Because especially if it's a cotton, it can shrink, and if you cut your pattern out before you wash it, it may shrink on you, and then it won't be the size that you expect. So always wash it before you do that. So just like before, we're going to mark onto our fabric. I'm using, this is a permanent marker. You can use a pencil, ballpoint pen, whatever you have that'll mark on it. I'm using a light fabric today for this demonstration because it's easier to see the lines. I usually like to use a dark fabric, because it hides stains well. But you can get elastic and Velcro in black. You can also get it in dark blue and red. But I'm going to be using white Velcro and white elastic today, just so that you can see the lines better. Okay, so there's our pattern. I'm going to pin this together so the fabric doesn't shift, and then we're going to cut it out. And again, this line is not the line that we're going to cut on. This line is our stitching line. Find my scissors. Okay, and just like before, we're going to cut somewhere between 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch away from the line, all the way around. Doesn't have to be absolutely exact. We're not making a rocket ship here. We're making something that's going to help our loved one. Functionality is top priority. If it looks good, that's great. Maybe you're the type of person that it has to be absolutely perfect. I can be like that, but I found that I just don't have that luxury these days, being a caregiver. So I'm okay if my lines aren't absolutely straight. If my seams stray from the line, I'm not going to freak out over it. It's still going to work just fine. That was a really hard lesson for me to learn. Okay, now then, we're going to put our elastic in our cover. Right sides are together. And we're going to put the elastic between the two pieces of fabric. We're going to slide it in there. And what's important here, I'm going to line up all three of those edges, the fabric and the elastic, put it about in the middle, this skinny tab on the side. It's important that it goes straight across. You don't want it to go at an angle. It should go straight across because we're going to wind up attaching it, of course, over here to this tab. So you can feel it with your fingers, get it in there straight, and then we're going to pin it back in place. Now we're going to sew this. We're going to sew on the line, and we're going to start about right here. We're going to go all the way around, and we're going to stop about right there. And after we've sewed all the way around, we're going to come back and we're going to sew an extra time across this elastic just so that it's anchored in there really well. Sewed the cover. I left one side open for turning, but before we can turn it, we need to trim the corners and clip the inside curves. You want to trim these 4 corners. And clip right up to the stitching on the inside curves. We do this so that it doesn't bunch in the corners, the fabric doesn't get all wadded up when we turn it. It's important that you be very careful and you don't clip those stitches. You'll wind up with a hole in your cover if you do. But if you do clip your stitches, it's not the end of the world. It can be fixed. Just turn it back wrong side out and stitch a little bit closer. Alright, so now we're going to turn it right side out and see what we've got. Now, even though I said that this is basically a glorified beanbag, and it is, you shouldn't treat it like a beanbag. My kids love beanbags, but this is not one that I let them play with. It's all fun and games until somebody gets hit in the head with a bag full of metal. You can use a chopstick to kind of poke those corners out square, just like that. Done and done. Okay. We're almost finished. So next, I'm going to iron this, make my seams nice and flat, and then I'm going to stitch around the perimeter of this cover. I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to stitch about maybe 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, all the way around back to about right here. I'm still leaving this open because we're going to wind up putting our elastic in over here. It's marked on the cover where the Velcro goes. I like to use the sew-on Velcro. I don't recommend the stick-on variety. It just doesn't work for me. Nothing very magical here. I'm just going to pin it on and then stitch it on around the perimeter. The only thing of importance is that one piece goes on this side, the other piece goes on this side, on the opposite side. Pin that in place and sew it on. We're going to fold under the little tabs right here on the edge where the elastic is going to go. Tuck that in there. And this can be the most aggravating part of the entire project, just because it's not going to fit underneath the foot of your sewing machine cleanly. You're going to have to kind of bend the fabric a little bit to get the cloth to lay in there good. Now we're going to take the elastic and we're going to just stick it in place in there. And now I know for my mother, I need a little, she's very petite, and I need a little less than 3 inches for it to fit her hand good. So I'm using the ruler on my board here. That's just a tiny bit less than 3 inches. I'm going to pin that in place, and I'm going to sew it. I have to kind of lay it down like this, put it underneath the presser foot, sew once, take that pin out, and then sew it a couple times. Probably before you want to sew it several times though, you want to sew it just once and then test it, see if that's enough or too much elastic. If it needs to be tighter, shorten it. If it's too tight, let it out. And there it is. It's all sewn in. Take your weight. It's still pinned shut. We're going to give it a test drive before we sew that closed. Close that weight up in there. Fold this over just like that. Tuck those edges in there pretty. And there you have it. Try that out. See if it works. If it's enough weight, great. If it's not, add more. If it's too much, take some out. If you find that the bag that you made for your weight is not big enough to hold all of the weight you want to put in there, make your own pattern for a little bit bigger bag. That's all you have to do. So you're happy with the weight that you have in your bag. You've got just the perfect amount of BBs. It's time to close it up. Tuck those edges in, those raw edges, just like that. And you're going to pin down very close to the BBs with a pin. That's to hold those BBs away from your pressure foot on your sewing machine so that they don't try to roll underneath where you're sewing. And then you're just going to sew straight across there. This has been my first video. I hope you'll give me some sort of constructive criticism, comments. Let me know how you like it. If it's confusing, send me any questions. And follow me on my Tumblr. I'm going to be starting a blog about caregiving and how we can help the people we love live a better, more productive life. Anyway, thanks so much. Information in the description.